Millionaire CEO on the brink of losing his company at noon. A waitress gives advice that changes his fate. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Jack Peterson sat in the corner of the upscale Manhattan restaurant, his fingers nervously tapping against the sleek surface of the table. The massive windows around him framed a crisp afternoon skyline, but his mind was elsewhere, on the devastating news he'd just received. The clock was ticking. At noon, if he couldn't find a solution, he would lose everything. His multi-million-dollar tech company, which he had poured his heart and soul into, was on the brink of collapse. The latest market crash had hit them hard, and his investors were ready to pull the plug. Every possible resource had been exhausted, and his last hope was a deal that had to be signed by noon. Jack knew he needed a miracle, but all he could do was stare at the half-drunk whiskey in his glass. His phone buzzed again with another urgent email, but he ignored it. There was nothing left to do, or so he thought. As Jack sat there, drowning in his thoughts, the door to the restaurant opened. A soft jingle of the bell above the door snapped him out of his haze. He looked up, his gaze locking onto Sarah Johnson, a waitress who had been serving him for the past month. She approached his table with a practiced smile, her black apron contrasting against the white shirt she wore. She set down a glass of water, but Jack barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere. Sarah had heard the rumors around the restaurant, about Jack's company, his reputation, and how things were falling apart. Most people would have seen him as just another wealthy, arrogant businessman, but she'd never been one to judge by appearances. Jack's eyes were glued to the phone, his posture rigid with tension. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Peterson?" she asked. Her voice calm but firm. He barely glanced at her. "Just some quiet," he muttered under his breath. Sarah paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the frustrated millionaire before her. She had seen customers like him, men who thought their wealth could solve everything. But something about the way he was slumped in his chair, with the weight of the world on his shoulders, made her hesitate. It wasn't her job to offer advice, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was one decision away from losing everything. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her voice quieter now. "I know you're probably overwhelmed, but if you need help, I'm happy to offer a suggestion." Jack looked up, his sharp eyes narrowing. "A suggestion?" he repeated, a mix of disbelief and curiosity in his voice. Sarah nodded, her posture still professional. "I overheard some of your conversation earlier. You're trying to save your company, right? You need to pivot." Jack studied her, unsure of whether to be offended or intrigued. "And who are you to be offering business advice?" he asked, his tone skeptical but not dismissive. Sarah's eyes didn't flinch. "Just a waitress," she replied with a small smile. "But sometimes, it helps to look at things from a different perspective. If you diversify your investments, you might be able to find new growth. It's about looking at your options, not clinging to old methods." Jack sat back in his chair, stunned by the calm certainty in her voice. He had expected mockery or a quick dismissal, but Sarah had spoken with the kind of confidence that made him listen. "And what makes you think I should take advice from someone who serves food for a living?" he asked, leaning in slightly, intrigued by her calm demeanor. Sarah tilted her head, her voice steady as she spoke. "Because sometimes, the people you least expect can see things from a different angle. It's not about who you are, it's about the knowledge you have. And right now, I think you're missing a major opportunity." Jack stared at her for a long moment. He wasn't sure why, but something in her words made him feel like he had just been handed a lifeline. He had been so wrapped up in the panic of his own situation that he hadn't considered taking a step back. "You're right," he finally admitted the words, leaving his mouth before he could stop them. Sarah gave him a brief nod before turning to walk away, leaving him in stunned silence. Little did Jack know, that brief interaction with Sarah would change the course of his entire future. Jack sat frozen for a moment, his mind racing. Sarah's words echoed in his head, as though a switch had flipped in his brain. He had spent years building his empire, relying on strategy, connections, and money. But now, in the face of his impending downfall, a waitress, someone he had never imagined would have the answers, had just given him the clarity he so desperately needed. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, reminding him that he had mere hours to make a move. He couldn't afford to waste time on pride anymore. He needed to act. Without thinking, Jack stood up and motioned for Sarah, who was at the other end of the restaurant, efficiently taking orders from another table. "Sarah," he called, his voice carrying through the bustling room. She turned, surprised to see him standing, but she quickly made her way over, her expression unreadable. "Yes, Mr. Peterson?" she asked, her voice as calm and professional as ever. Jack didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need you to explain more. I want to hear your ideas. Can we sit down for a few minutes?" Sarah hesitated for a split second, clearly not used to being asked to step outside the usual professional boundaries. But she nodded and led him to a quiet corner of the restaurant. As they sat, Jack took a deep breath, trying to focus. He had faced countless boardroom battles, complex deals, and financial forecasts, but now, it felt as though he was on the edge of something new, something entirely unexpected. "You're not the first person to tell me to pivot," Jack said, his voice low. "But I've tried everything. Every consultant, every expert, they all said the same thing. We're too far gone." Sarah looked at him with a level of empathy that surprised him. "I understand your frustration," she said. "But sometimes, the solution isn't always the obvious one. When you're stuck, you need to look for opportunities in places you wouldn't normally think to look." Jack frowned. "Are you saying I should gamble everything on emerging markets and energy stocks?" Sarah's calm eyes met his. "It's not about gambling. It's about diversifying your risks. Right now, you're too focused on trying to hold on to what you have. But what if what you need is to let go and find something new, something bigger?" Jack looked at her, searching her face for any hint of doubt, but there was none. "What would you do in my place?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his voice. Sarah paused for a moment, her gaze drifting to the window, as if contemplating the vastness of the city outside. "I would do what you're afraid to do," she said finally. "I would take the risk. I would invest in what's coming, not what's already here. It's scary, I know, but without risk, there's no reward." Jack swallowed, considering her words. He had always been the one in control, the one with the answers. But now, for the first time in a long time, he was listening to someone else. "You're right," he said, the weight of the decision settling in. "I don't have anything to lose anymore." Sarah smiled slightly. "Sometimes, that's when you make the best decisions." Jack stood, his resolve hardening. "All right, let's do it. Let's make the moves we need to make." He looked at her, his eyes intense. "But we'll need more than just talk. We'll need a plan, a real strategy." Sarah nodded, her expression unwavering. "I can help with that." Jack extended his hand, and Sarah shook it firmly. It was an unexpected alliance, but something told him that this was the turning point he had been waiting for. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "I don't know where this will lead, but I'm glad you were here today." Sarah nodded. "We all have a role to play, Mr. Peterson. Sometimes, it's just a matter of finding it." As Jack left the restaurant that day, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The world outside seemed a little brighter, a little less daunting. He didn't know if Sarah's advice would save his company, but he was ready to take the risk, ready to move forward into the unknown. As the days passed, Jack Peterson found himself in uncharted territory. He had always been the one calling the shots, the one with all the answers. But now, in the wake of his conversation with Sarah, he was questioning everything. The risk of the decisions ahead weighed heavily on him, but something in Sarah's calm, composed manner had convinced him to take the leap. He was tired of holding on to a sinking ship. He needed to change course. Sarah had given him the clarity he needed, but the real test was about to begin. His team at the company, full of seasoned executives and financial experts, had already prepared a strategy, one that was familiar to them, one that leaned heavily on safe investments and known paths. It was a solid plan, but one that would not get them ahead. Jack knew it, deep down. He had a choice to make. Should he stay with the plan that had brought him this far? Or should he embrace Sarah's advice and try something entirely new? The thought of facing his board of directors with a completely different approach was intimidating. Would they support him? Or would they see him as a man who had lost his touch? Someone who had let emotions cloud his judgment? He stared at his computer screen, his mind racing. He had scheduled a meeting with his board for the following day, and it would be the moment of truth. As he sat in his office that evening, the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on him, his phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Mr. Peterson," the message read, "I've done some research on the emerging markets. There's a company you might want to consider. They have a small footprint now, but they're positioned for massive growth in the next 5 years." Jack smiled to himself. Even now, she was thinking ahead. She wasn't just giving him advice, she was showing him how to see the bigger picture. He quickly typed a response. "I'll look into it. We'll discuss it tomorrow." The next morning, Jack walked into the boardroom with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. His board members were already seated, their eyes on him as he took his place at the head of the table. He could feel the tension in the room, the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. The familiar faces, the same voices, all eager to know what Jack's next move would be. "Gentlemen," Jack began, his voice steady, "we've come to a crossroads. The current strategy is safe, but it's not enough to bring us the growth we need. I believe it's time for a change." A murmur rippled through the room. Some of the board members exchanged glances, clearly puzzled. "Are you suggesting a complete shift in direction, Jack?" one of them asked, his tone cautious. Jack nodded. "Yes. I've been working with someone who's given me a fresh perspective. We need to diversify, and we need to do it quickly. I've looked into emerging markets, and there's a company I believe has massive potential." He could see the skepticism in their eyes, the doubt that always came when someone proposed a radical idea. But Jack was committed now. He had to trust his instincts. "Are you suggesting we invest in a startup? In something we don't fully understand?" another board member questioned, his voice tinged with concern. "Yes," Jack replied, his voice firm. "But it's not just about the company. It's about the future. We need to be part of the next big thing, not just what's in front of us today." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Jack could feel the eyes of his team on him, waiting for him to prove that this wasn't just a desperate move. This was the moment that would define his future, and he knew it. Slowly, the murmurs started again. One by one, his board members spoke up, some cautiously agreeing, others asking more questions. It was a delicate balance, but Jack could see the shift happening. They were beginning to see the possibility, the chance to make something big out of a small opportunity. By the end of the meeting, Jack had managed to secure the board's approval, but he knew the real work was just beginning. As he left the boardroom, a sense of relief washed over him. It wasn't a done deal yet, but it was a step in the right direction. The next challenge was to execute. Jack couldn't help but think back to Sarah. He'd trusted her, and now, he was going to put that trust to the test. He couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the woman who had changed everything. Without her, he would still be stuck in his old ways, afraid to take the risks necessary for true growth. As he sat down at his desk to start preparing the next steps, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibility. As the days went by, Jack Peterson found himself working tirelessly to implement the new strategy. It was a decision that had shaken his confidence at first, but now, it was slowly starting to feel like the right choice. The emerging market investment, the bold step he had taken with Sarah's advice, was beginning to show signs of promise. His team, though hesitant at first, had rallied behind him, supporting the new direction with a mix of cautious optimism. Jack knew, however, that this was just the beginning. The real challenge lay in execution. Every move had to be calculated. Every decision had to be precise. As the weeks passed, Jack continued to meet with Sarah, discussing potential investments and refining strategies. Sarah had proven herself not only as a trusted advisor, but also as someone who could see the bigger picture. Her knowledge was invaluable, and Jack found himself respecting her more with each passing day. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman of substance, someone who had seen the world from a different angle, and now, Jack was starting to see things through her eyes. The company was slowly starting to turn around. The emerging markets investment was paying off, and Jack could feel the weight on his shoulders easing. He was starting to regain control, but it wasn't easy. There were still plenty of obstacles to overcome. The competition was fierce, and Jack knew that any misstep could lead to disaster. But he felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, he was excited about the future. Sarah's voice echoed in his mind. "It's not about gambling. It's about diversifying your risks." He had listened, and it had paid off. The board, once skeptical, was now fully on board with his vision. The CEO's once bleak outlook was now filled with hope. Yet, Jack knew that hope alone wasn't enough. He needed more than that. He needed to prove to himself that he could adapt, that he could thrive in a new era of business. He needed to show the world that he wasn't just another businessman clinging to old methods. He was someone who could evolve. The company's success was no longer just about the bottom line. It was about something bigger. It was about leaving a legacy, about making an impact in a way that would resonate for years to come. Jack found himself standing in his office one morning, looking out at the skyline. The city was alive with possibility, and for the first time in a while, Jack felt he was truly living. It wasn't just about the deals or the money. It was about the people he had helped, the risks he had taken, and the lessons he had learned along the way. His phone buzzed, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Sarah. "I've been looking into some new opportunities," it read. "There's a startup I think you should consider. They're working on something big." Jack couldn't help but smile. Sarah was always thinking ahead, always one step ahead. He quickly typed back, "Send me the details. Let's talk about it." As Jack sat down to review the new opportunity, he couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement building inside him. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The next big move. The next chapter of his journey. And it all started with a waitress who had dared to challenge his assumptions, who had shown him a different way to look at the world. Jack knew that whatever happened next, he was ready. He wasn't the man he had been when he first walked into that restaurant. He was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. And with Sarah by his side, he knew that anything was possible. As Jack continued to immerse himself in the new strategy, the results were undeniable. The company was growing, the risks had paid off, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of achievement that wasn't tied to profits alone. The transformation wasn't just financial, it was personal. He was becoming someone different, someone who wasn't afraid to take chances, to learn from those around him. Sarah had been right all along. Diversifying his investments had opened doors to opportunities he never would have considered before. And now, with each passing day, Jack was seeing more and more of the pieces fall into place. The startup Sarah had recommended was thriving. The new partnerships he had established with emerging market companies were proving to be more lucrative than he had anticipated. But as successful as these ventures were, the real change had been within himself. Jack had stopped clinging to the old ways, the methods that had worked in the past but were no longer enough in today's fast-paced world. His mindset had shifted. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a leader, someone who had learned the value of listening, of humility, of embracing the unexpected. It was a lesson he would never forget. One afternoon, as Jack was walking through the office, he spotted Sarah in the hallway. She was carrying a stack of papers, moving with the same quiet efficiency he had come to admire. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, she had been nothing more than a waitress, someone he had underestimated. Now, she was an integral part of his team, advising him on strategy and helping him navigate the complex world of business. "Sarah," Jack called, his voice warm. She looked up and smiled, always polite, but never one to draw attention to herself. "Mr. Peterson," she replied, her tone respectful. "How's everything going?" Jack asked, his eyes scanning the papers in her hands. "It's going well," Sarah said, her smile widening slightly. "I think we're on track to exceed our projections for the next quarter." Jack nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "I'm glad to hear that. You've been a big part of this," he said sincerely. Sarah's smile faded slightly, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "I'm just doing my part," she said modestly. "I think we make a good team." Jack studied her for a moment, realizing just how far they had come. "We do," he agreed. "I couldn't have done this without you." The words were genuine, and Sarah seemed taken aback by the compliment. She had always been the quiet, unassuming type, but Jack could see that she had a unique brilliance. It wasn't just her financial expertise, it was her ability to see things from a different perspective, to think beyond the obvious. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice soft. Jack smiled. "Call me Jack. We're past the formalities, aren't we?" Sarah nodded, her expression changing ever so slightly. It was a rare moment of warmth, a moment where she let her guard down, just a little. "Jack," she repeated, the word almost unfamiliar on her lips. They stood there for a moment, a comfortable silence between them. For Jack, it was a moment of reflection. A moment where he realized how far he had come, not just in terms of business success, but in his personal growth. He had surrounded himself with the right people, people who challenged him, people who saw things differently, and people who helped him grow. Sarah had been one of those people. As Jack walked away, he felt a sense of gratitude. The future was still uncertain, and there would always be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he was on the right path. He had learned a valuable lesson. Success wasn't just about making the right decisions. It was about trusting the people around you and being open to new ideas. And in Sarah, he had found someone who had opened his eyes to a world of possibilities he had never considered before. As Jack sat in his office late one evening, the weight of the past few months settled on his shoulders. The company was thriving, the risks had paid off, and Sarah's guidance had proven to be invaluable. Yet, despite the success, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had made all the right moves, but there was still a sense of emptiness he couldn't ignore. The phone on his desk buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. "Jack," it began, "there's another opportunity I've been looking into. It's a bit risky, but I think it could be a game changer for us." Jack's curiosity was piqued. Over the past few months, Sarah had proven herself to be more than just a trusted advisor. She had become a sounding board, someone whose judgment he valued deeply. He quickly typed a reply. "Send me the details. I'm all ears." He knew that with Sarah's track record, it was an opportunity worth considering. A few moments later, Sarah sent him the information, outlining the potential for a new venture in sustainable technology. It was a market that had been on the rise, but Jack knew that entering it required careful planning and a significant investment. He sat back in his chair, thinking. This wasn't the type of decision he had taken lightly before. The stakes were high, and the competition in the industry was fierce. But the more he read, the more he found himself intrigued. This wasn't just about business. It was about making a real impact, about leaving a legacy. After all, Jack had spent his entire career chasing profits, but now he was starting to think about something bigger. This could be his chance to make a difference in the world. The next morning, Jack called Sarah into his office. She arrived promptly, as always, with a folder in hand. He motioned for her to sit down, then opened the file she had sent him. "This idea you have," Jack began, his voice steady. "It's bold. It's risky, but I think it could be the kind of move that defines my career. What do you think?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "I think it's the right move, Jack," she said. "The world is changing, and this industry is growing rapidly. We can either stay where we are and watch it pass us by, or we can take the leap and become part of it." Jack nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "I agree, but I need to be sure. This could be a game changer, but if it fails, it could set us back years." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "I know the risks, Jack, but I also know that if you want to leave a lasting impact, you have to take chances. This could be the opportunity that defines the next phase of your career. You've built a company from the ground up. Now it's time to build something that will make a real difference." Jack sat back, thinking for a moment. He had always played it safe in business, making calculated moves and sticking to what he knew. But the past few months had taught him something important. He had learned to trust people, to embrace new ideas, and to take risks. He looked at Sarah, his trusted advisor. "Let's do it," he said finally. "Let's take the leap. Let's make this happen." Sarah smiled, a look of pride crossing her face. "I knew you'd come around." Jack stood up and extended his hand. "Thank you, Sarah. I couldn't have done this without you." She shook his hand firmly, her smile widening. "We're just getting started." As Jack watched Sarah leave his office, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, he felt ready for whatever came next. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about creating something that would leave a mark on the world, something that would be remembered long after he was gone. The decision to invest in the new venture had been a turning point for Jack. Over the next few months, the company continued to grow, and the new direction began to take shape. The sustainable technology sector was full of promise, but also full of challenges. Jack found himself spending more time with Sarah, discussing new opportunities and refining their strategies. The more they worked together, the more Jack realized that Sarah was not just a valuable advisor. She was someone who could help him build something much bigger than he had originally imagined. As the weeks passed, the company's trajectory began to shift. The investments in renewable energy and technology started to bear fruit. Jack's decision to diversify had paid off, and the profits started rolling in. But beyond the financial success, what Jack found most rewarding was the sense of purpose that had come with the new direction. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about making a difference. The work they were doing in the sustainable technology field was impactful, and Jack could see the positive changes it was bringing to the world. Still, the journey hadn't been without its obstacles. There were moments when Jack felt the weight of the decisions he had made, moments when doubt crept in. The risks had been high, and there were still many hurdles to overcome. But each time Jack faced a challenge, Sarah was there, steady and composed, offering insights and solutions. Her confidence and dedication had become a source of strength for Jack. One afternoon, as Jack was going over some reports in his office, his phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "I think we've got something big," the message read. "There's a new project I want you to look into. It's risky, but it's aligned with everything we've been working toward." Jack's curiosity piqued. He quickly replied, "Send me the details." He knew that with Sarah's instincts and his leadership, they could take on whatever came next. That evening, Jack met with Sarah at his office. She arrived with a folder in hand, her usual calm demeanor in place. "What's the new opportunity?" Jack asked, leaning forward in his chair. Sarah sat down and placed the folder in front of him. "It's a partnership with a company that's developing a new form of clean energy," she began. "The technology is still in its early stages, but it has the potential to revolutionize the industry. The only problem is we'll need to secure funding and navigate some regulatory hurdles." Jack took a moment to look over the details. The project was ambitious, but it was exactly the kind of challenge he had been hoping for. He could see the potential. "This could be huge," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "But it's a big risk. Are we ready for it?" Sarah nodded. "I think we are. We've built the foundation. Now it's time to take the next step. But we'll need to move fast, and we'll need the right partners." Jack sat back in his chair, weighing the options. This was the kind of decision he had spent his career making. Risky, but with the potential for great reward. He looked at Sarah. "Let's do it. Let's make this happen." Sarah's smile was subtle, but there was a sense of pride in her eyes. "I knew you'd say that," she said. Jack stood up, shaking her hand. "Thank you for believing in me, Sarah." Sarah nodded, her voice calm but confident. "We're in this together, Jack. Let's make it work." As Jack walked out of his office later that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was the right path. He had the support of his team, and most importantly, he had Sarah by his side. Together, they would build something that would change the world. Jack didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he was ready for whatever came next. Months passed, and Jack continued to navigate the complexities of the new venture. The clean energy project had its challenges, but it was quickly gaining momentum. As the company's involvement in the project deepened, Jack could see the results taking shape. The partnership they had secured with a small but innovative startup was starting to show promise. The technology was evolving rapidly, and Jack was more convinced than ever that this was the future. Despite the growing success, Jack felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The company had come a long way, but there was still so much to do. He knew the stakes were high. The competition in the clean energy sector was fierce, and there were countless hurdles to overcome. Regulatory approvals, funding, and public perception were just a few of the challenges they faced. But Jack had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him they were on the right path. Sarah had been instrumental in keeping everything moving forward. Her advice had been invaluable, and Jack had come to rely on her not just as a business advisor, but as a partner in every sense of the word. They had built something together that was much bigger than either of them had anticipated. One afternoon, Jack sat down in his office, reviewing the latest reports. The figures were promising, but there were still areas that needed attention. He was about to make a call when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "We need to talk. I've got some concerns about the project." Jack's heart skipped a beat. They had always been in sync, and Sarah's concerns were never trivial. He quickly typed back, "What's going on? Let's meet." 30 minutes later, Sarah was sitting across from him in his office, her expression serious. "There's been some pushback from regulators," she said, her voice steady. "It's not unexpected, but we need to be prepared. They're questioning the scalability of the technology." Jack leaned forward, his mind racing. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Sarah took a deep breath. We need to double down on our research and show them the long-term viability. If we can prove that this technology is not only effective but sustainable, we'll be in a much stronger position. But it's going to take time and resources. Jack nodded. He had already known that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but hearing it from Sarah made it all the more real. He sat back in his chair, weighing the options. We're committed to this, Sarah. We've come too far to back down now. Let's find a way to make it work. Sarah gave him a reassuring smile. That's why I'm here. We'll get through this together. Over the next few weeks, Jack and Sarah worked tirelessly, meeting with scientists, researchers, and government officials. They needed to secure the necessary approvals, and the pressure was mounting. But through it all, Jack felt a sense of clarity he had never experienced before. He wasn't just fighting for the company's survival. He was fighting for something bigger. The chance to change the world. The late nights and endless meetings were exhausting, but every step forward brought them closer to their goal. And through it all, Jack knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone. Sarah had become more than just a colleague. She had become his most trusted ally. Together, they were building something that could truly make a difference. Weeks later, the breakthrough came. The regulators finally approved the technology, and Jack's company was officially part of the growing clean energy revolution. The news was met with excitement, but Jack remained calm, his eyes focused on the next steps. He knew the real work had just begun. As Jack sat in his office, looking out over the city skyline, he felt a sense of pride that went beyond business success. They had done it, and the journey had only just started. The months that followed the approval were a whirlwind of activity. The clean energy project was officially underway, and Jack couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. The company had grown exponentially, and now, with the green light from regulators, they were moving full steam ahead. There were still obstacles to overcome, of course, but the momentum was undeniable. Jack had worked with Sarah day in and day out, refining the technology and working with investors who were now eager to be part of the next big thing. Jack had spent years building his business empire, but this venture, this movement, felt different. It was no longer just about profits or market share. It was about something more meaningful, something that would leave a lasting legacy. And the more he saw of Sarah's dedication, the more he realized that she had become a central part of this journey. Her insight, her ability to see potential where others saw risk, had guided him every step of the way. She wasn't just an advisor anymore. She was a partner in every sense of the word. The weeks seemed to fly by as they moved forward with plans, meetings, and presentations. They secured more investors, finalized partnerships, and began ramping up production. The technology they had worked so hard to develop was finally coming to life. It was a thrilling, exhausting time. Jack often found himself late in the office, poring over reports and data, trying to anticipate every challenge before it appeared. But even during the most stressful moments, he never once questioned the path they were on. This was it, the turning point. It wasn't just about making a fortune. It was about making a difference. Sarah was there every step of the way, her calm demeanor a constant source of stability. Whenever the pressure got too intense, she would remind him of why they were doing this. It wasn't just business. It was about changing the world for the better. One evening, as they were going over some final details for a major investor meeting the next day, Jack looked at Sarah and smiled. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Sarah met his gaze and smiled back, though her expression remained as focused as ever. "We're in this together, Jack. You took the first step, and I'm just here to help you see it through." Jack nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. In all the years he had been in business, he had never had someone he could rely on so fully, someone who believed in the vision as much as he did. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about the bond they had built, the trust they had earned. The next morning, Jack and Sarah stood side by side as they presented their vision to a room full of investors. The stakes were high, but Jack felt an unusual calm wash over him. This wasn't just another presentation. It was the culmination of everything they had worked for. As the presentation concluded, there was a brief moment of silence. Then, one by one, the investors stood and applauded. Jack's heart raced as the realization hit him. This was it. The world was about to change. "We've got their support," Sarah whispered to him, her voice barely audible over the applause. Jack looked at her, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "We did it," he said simply. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. With the backing they needed, the project moved forward faster than Jack could have imagined. They hired more teams, expanded production, and began rolling out their technology to a global market. It was a heady time, but Jack never lost sight of what mattered most, making an impact. As the company continued to grow, Jack often found himself reflecting on the journey. He had started with a small idea, a risky move that could have led to failure. But with Sarah's guidance and unwavering support, they had turned it into something bigger than he could have ever imagined. They had created a legacy, one that would leave a lasting mark on the world. Jack knew that the road ahead was still full of challenges, but for the first time in his career, he felt ready to face whatever came next. With Sarah by his side, there was nothing they couldn't achieve.